It was December 2005 and the city, frozen in anticipation of the holidays, smelled of oranges, gasoline, and snowless wind. There was something heavy in the air, as if winter itself knew that what lay ahead wasn't just twinkling lights, trees, and champagne. On the eastern edge of Minneapolis, in a quiet apartment complex, Ryan Whitmore believed he was living a happy life. He had everything an ordinary man in his early 30s could want. A job he loved, a beautiful wife who kissed his temple every morning before heading to work, and a best friend with whom he'd shared not only a reckless youth but also a business that had grown over the past 6 years from a garage project into a small but profitable chain of auto parts stores. Ryan liked coming home. His wife, Emily, always filled the apartment with light. She knew how to keep the house in order, made sure his favorite salami never ran out, and brewed fresh coffee every morning. She didn't argue over silly things, and her smile still knocked the breath out of him like it had during those first few months of dating. Sometimes he'd catch himself thinking he'd just gotten lucky. Too lucky. Nick wasn't just a friend, he was a brother. Not by blood, but in every other way. They'd explored construction sites as kids, survived their first fight, their first crush, their first heartbreak. Ryan still remembered how, at 17, they dug a hole together late at night in an old cemetery to bury a dog they'd rescued after it was hit by a car, a dog they had tried to nurse back to health for 3 weeks. After that silent ritual, they had an unspoken agreement. If something ever happened, if one of them was in trouble, the other would come. No questions asked. It was never said out loud, just understood. They worked well together in business, too. Nick could sell anything to anyone. Ryan was the organizer, the system builder, the numbers guy. They were like the left and right wheels of a cart, useless on their own, but together they moved forward. There was trust, real trust, strong and solid. At least, that's what Ryan believed. That morning had started like any other. Ryan got to the office, handled some supplier negotiations, approved a shipment to their warehouse in Des Moines, and, unexpectedly, found himself with almost 4 free hours. Emily had texted that she was swamped and wouldn't be home until late. Nick, supposedly, was out of town visiting his mom, who wasn't feeling well. With a sigh of freedom, Ryan decided to grab a bite to eat. His stomach growled. All it had gotten was morning coffee and a half-eaten bagel. He turned off the main avenue, drove a few blocks, and spotted a familiar restaurant sign. Slowing down, he parked out front. The lot was nearly empty, but one car caught his eye, a silver Lexus. Nick's car. Ryan frowned. Something felt off. Nick was supposed to be out of town. Maybe he'd just come back early? But then why hadn't he called or dropped by the office? Weird, but not a crisis. As he reached for the door handle to get out, he saw another car. His heart clenched. A white Peugeot, Emily's. She kept it spotless, always gleaming. She wasn't at work? The seconds stretched out. Not quite panic, not yet, just a string of uncomfortable coincidences. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe they'd just bumped into each other. They'd known each other for years, birthdays, holidays, social events. Maybe he dropped by, maybe she got out early, decided to grab lunch. But why this expensive restaurant? Ryan stepped out of the car and walked inside. Dim lighting, quiet chatter, clinking glasses. He nodded to the hostess as if he had a reservation and headed toward the back, behind a glass partition etched with gold patterns. There they were. Emily and Nick sitting across from each other, side by side, as if the rest of the world didn't exist. She was laughing, head tilted. He was talking, holding her hand. Then he leaned in and kissed her quickly, casually, like it was routine. They didn't see Ryan. He froze. Something inside him snapped, like a cable stretched too far and suddenly cut. He turned slowly and sat at a nearby table, just close enough to watch without being seen. His body filled not with rage, not yet, but with a cold, clear focus. Thoughts moved precisely, like through fog, when there are no emotions left, only calculations. He took out his phone. Texted Emily, "Hey babe. How's your day?" The reply came almost instantly, "Hey, hon," drowning in reports. "Don't expect me home before 9. Then he messaged Nick, "How's your mom? Everything okay?" Nick responded just as quickly, "All good, man. She's better. I'll be back tomorrow." Ryan never took his eyes off them. They were still chatting, unaware their secret was no longer secret. He ordered a glass of cognac and a bottle of champagne. 20 minutes later, the waiter set the tray in front of him. Ryan picked it up and walked toward their table. They noticed him only when he was a few steps away. The look on their faces real, raw panic. Emily jumped up, napkin falling to the floor. Nick went pale and opened his mouth to say something. "Hey," Ryan said quietly. "How's your mom, Nick?" He lifted the champagne bottle. "This is for you. To celebrate. The end of my marriage. And the beginning of whatever this is." He placed the bottle on their table. The silence that followed seemed endless. Nick stood up, stammering, "Ryan, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" Ryan said, voice calm. "Then tell me, what does it look like?" No words were needed. Ryan took a step forward and punched Nick squarely in the jaw. He dropped like a sack of bricks. People turned. Someone screamed. Phones came out. Emily gasped, tears instantly falling. She whispered something, tried to reach for Ryan, but he brushed her away. "We're getting divorced. Tomorrow." He picked up the cognac. "And this I'm taking. I'll need it." He walked out, never looking back. The cold didn't touch him. The pain would come later. For now, there was only emptiness. Loud and echoing, like after an explosion. His entire life, everything he'd built, had just fallen into the abyss. And that was only the beginning. He walked without direction. Past storefronts dressed for the holidays, past people dragging shopping bags and kids on sleds, past bus stops where teenagers smoked and homeless men huddled under thin blankets. It all passed like a backdrop in someone else's movie. His hands were freezing, but he didn't notice. The cognac bottle stayed gripped tightly in his fingers, the only anchor in a collapsing world. He didn't need confirmation. No doubts. Everything had already been said in their faces, their touch, their kiss. He didn't count how many times he'd told Emily she was the meaning of his life. How many nights he fell asleep holding her, feeling protected like inside a fortress. How many times he'd thanked Nick, calling him a brother. Those memories now seared through him. And the brighter they were, the more they burned. The apartment greeted him with hollow silence. Just days ago it had felt warm, lived in. Now it was a stranger's place. Ryan sat in the kitchen, didn't turn the lights on. Set the bottle on the table, reached for a glass, then put it away and drank straight from the bottle. The alcohol didn't warm him. It numbed, like ice water over a burn. What he couldn't process was this. Why? Why destroy what took so long to build, with effort, with trust? He wasn't perfect. He forgot to buy bread sometimes. He came home tired and silent on occasion. But he tried. Always tried. And most of all, he trusted. Completely. Without suspicion. His phone buzzed. First once, Emily. Then again, Nick. He silenced it. They didn't deserve explanations. Not after lying to his face while holding hands at that table like nothing was wrong. He didn't care who made the first move. It didn't matter. There was no excuse for either of them. He woke up on the couch, still dressed. His head ached like a train engine, but his thoughts were sharp. He showered, made coffee, and began taking action. First, a lawyer. Andrew Carter, an old friend, steady as bedrock. Ryan explained everything calmly, almost coldly. Divorce. As fast as possible. You sure? Andrew asked. Absolutely. Emily didn't argue. She tried calling, texting, writing long messages. He read one of them. I didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened. I got confused and deleted it before finishing. He didn't believe a single word anymore. How do you accidentally betray someone who gave you everything? He messaged Nick just once. Our partnership is over. As far as I'm concerned, you're nobody to me now. Nick replied, I'm sorry, man. I was an idiot. I ruined everything. I wish I could take it back. Ryan didn't respond. What would be the point? 2 days later, he packed up Emily's things. Neatly, not out of rage, not in a frenzy. Just methodically. Dresses, books, jewelry, her dumb vanilla-scented candles she used to scatter across the apartment. 3 large suitcases and 1 box. Then he called her. Come get your stuff. Can we talk? No. She showed up an hour later. Pale, no makeup, zipped up tight in her winter coat. He opened the door without a word. She stepped in, scanned the room, started to cry. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered, but Ryan raised a hand. Just go. I'm hurting too, then we're even. She left like a shadow. He shut the door behind her and sat on the floor. So many words had been spoken over the years, promises, dreams, plans. All of it disappeared like frost on a window when the sun hits. He didn't feel lonely. He felt hollow. As if someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made him human, leaving only skin and breath behind. Nick didn't give up. He kept texting, calling, begging for a conversation. One time, he even showed up. Knocked on the door. Ryan opened it, not to talk, but to end it. Get out, he said. Please, just hear me, you slept with my wife. You lied to my face. It was a mistake, no. It was a choice. And you made it. He hit him. Again. Hard and clean. Nick stumbled, then stood, wiped the blood from his lip. I deserved that, he said softly. That's all you'll get, Ryan replied and slammed the door. The business had to be rebuilt. They split assets, dissolved the old company, filed new paperwork. It took weeks. But strangely, the process was cathartic, like slicing away dead flesh. The company survived. At first it ran on sheer willpower. The money was still good, but the joy was gone. Everything that once brought excitement now felt pointless. Word eventually reached him. Emily and Nick had tried living together. It didn't last 6 months. Apparently, the thrill of infidelity didn't translate well into real life with bills, dishes, and Monday mornings. Ryan didn't feel happy about it. Didn't gloat. It was just a fact. Months passed. Ryan stopped talking much. He built walls. Women tried approaching coworkers, clients, people he met by chance. But every time he saw a smile, he saw Emily's face instead. And he pulled away. He started walking late at night. No destination. Just walking until exhaustion hit. Sometimes he sat in a park and stared at the streetlights. Sometimes he went to that same restaurant street. Stood outside. Looked at the sign. Felt nothing, no rage, no sorrow. Just a void. He often wondered, what if he hadn't gone for lunch that day? Would he have ever found out? Or would he have kept living inside a beautiful lie? Maybe ignorance would have been easier. But deep down, he knew, truth, even bitter, was better than illusion. He stopped expecting things to get better. He just lived. Alone. No brother. No wife. No faith, but truth. And that was his path. Nearly a year passed. Winter melted into spring, spring turned into a hot, sluggish summer, then came a dull, gray autumn, and suddenly it was December again. The city once more glowed with garlands and sales signs. The smell of cinnamon, wet wool, and overcooked cider filled the air. But Ryan still avoided anything that reminded him of what once was. Holidays no longer brought joy, they marked time like healed scars. The pain was gone, but the memory lingered. He no longer hoped for miracles. Didn't make plans. Didn't dream. He simply lived on autopilot. He worked, ate, sometimes drank, not to forget, but to dull the pressure building inside. He had no friends. The old ones had drifted away after the collapse, and he didn't let new ones get close. Calls went unanswered. Social invitations were declined. He avoided anything personal. He'd become a man without a past. As if someone else had lived that life before him. Still, the business kept going. It didn't grow like it once had, but it stayed afloat. Ryan streamlined everything, removed excess roles, outsourced entire departments, restructured the product catalog, implemented strict accountability. The company became a machine, dry, precise, emotionless. Much like him. One evening, after staying late at the office, Ryan stopped by a 24-hour supermarket. His usual route, bread, milk, coffee, a few frozen dinners. As he stood in line at the register, a voice behind him made his muscles tense instinctively. Female. Soft. With that slight, familiar tremble at the end of a sentence. Emily's voice? He turned slowly. She stood at the next checkout lane, holding a basket of groceries, bundled in a long coat and knit beanie without makeup. She looked tired. Not broken, just ordinary. Their eyes met. Neither smiled. Neither nodded. She looked away first. Outside, the cold air hit his lungs. He lit a cigarette without thinking. He quit years ago. Tonight didn't count. His hands shook, not from the cold. There was no pain, just a quiet tightening in his chest, like something long buried had come unlatched. They didn't run into each other again. But that moment unearthed something. Not feelings, those were long gone. Not hatred. Not even regret. Just a realization that her shadow still lived inside him. Sat in the corner of his mind with the same quiet expression she'd worn at breakfast. And if he ever wanted to move forward, he had to let that shadow go. He started throwing things out. Dishes they'd bought together. Pillows they'd picked out. Old photos where they looked happy, he didn't burn them or tear them up, just tossed them. Then he moved. Rented a smaller place. Nothing fancy. No memories. He moved in over a weekend. Alone. He didn't ask for help. That was part of the point. Every box he carried down those stairs was another step away from the life he'd lost. After the move, the emptiness changed. It wasn't painful anymore, it was clean. Like a room after a deep scrub. No clutter. No weight. And in that space, maybe something new could grow. He started noticing people again. In the grocery store. On the subway. In line at the DMV. People laughing. People humming to themselves. People yelling into their phones or just walking deep in thought. The world didn't feel like background noise anymore. It felt real. And that was terrifying. Because with awareness came vulnerability. One night, Ryan stayed late at the office again. One of the newer employees, Kyle, had stuck around too, finishing reports. The kid was young, bright, focused. After they wrapped up, Ryan offered to grab coffee. They each pulled a cup from the vending machine and stepped outside into the cold. "Hey," Cal said out of nowhere, "you're Ryan Whitmore, right? Used to be partners with Nick Benson." Ryan turned his head slowly. "Yeah. He taught a short course at our college a few years ago. All about business, motivation, partnership stuff. We read a lot about your company back then. You guys had a solid model." Ryan nodded. It had been a long time since he'd said that name out loud. "You work solo now?" "I do." Cal was quiet for a second. He said he blew it. Told us he ruined everything with one mistake. Said once someone betrays you, they don't deserve another chance. He looked broken. Ryan didn't know what to say. His lips pressed into a thin line. "I guess he's right," he said softly. "Betrayal doesn't go away. It becomes part of who you are." Cal stared into his coffee. "Did you ever let it go?" "Almost." They drank in silence, then went back inside. A few days later, Cal brought his sister to the office. Her name was Madison. Small, with short hair and clear, direct eyes. She was looking for a job. Ryan didn't like hiring based on connections, but there was something about her, not beauty, exactly, but presence. He gave her a chance. Turned out she was good. Madison adjusted quickly. She didn't pry, didn't force herself into conversations, didn't try to get close. But one afternoon, as they drove to a client's site together, an old song came on the radio. One he and Emily had danced to at their wedding. Ryan reached to change the station, but Madison stopped him. "Let it play," she said. "There's strength in that one." Sad but honest. And suddenly he knew she understood. Not the details, but the essence. And she didn't judge. Didn't pity. She simply accepted. It was a new feeling. Not love, not yet. But the beginning of trust. And that was enough. Madison came into his life not like a storm, not like lightning, not like something that knocks down walls. She came in quietly like the first raindrop on a dusty window. First just a smile in the hallway, a quick message, a shared lunch. Then more thoughts exchanged, awkward laughs, casual conversations about books. She didn't push. But she didn't vanish either. Ryan realized he started listening again. Not with anticipation, but with curiosity. It didn't matter what she was saying. It was how she said it, alive. She wasn't like Emily at all. Madison didn't have that polished elegance, the careful grace that used to dazzle him. What she had instead was a kind of straightforwardness, almost blunt, but with a softness that surfaced in small gestures. She didn't perform. She lived. They began spending time together outside of work by accident. After a late meeting, he offered her a ride. It was pouring. She stood under the awning, hugging a folder to her chest. She agreed cautiously, but the conversation came easily. Weather. Deadlines. Weekend plans. And somewhere in the middle, Ryan realized he was smiling. Not out of politeness. Really smiling. When was the last time that happened? Their next meetup was nearly planned. Late office hours again. Coffee. Then a deeper conversation. About the past, not specifics, but enough. "You survived betrayal," she said softly. "And you didn't shut down. That says a lot." He didn't reply. He didn't want pity. But what she offered wasn't pity, it was respect. And it mattered. They started grabbing lunch together. Cafes, diners, park benches with coffee cups. Slowly, something inside Ryan began to thaw. Not dramatically. Like frozen earth under the first sun rays. He still didn't believe in love. But around Madison, he felt calm. No games. No pressure. Just peace. When she invited him to her birthday dinner, he hesitated. He hated crowds now. But she promised. "It'll be small. Friends. No toasts. Just food." And he went. A tiny apartment. A few people. Kyle and his girlfriend. Madison in jeans and a sweater, no makeup, but her eyes sparkled. He saw her laugh, full, honest, loud. Later, when everyone left, he stayed to help with the dishes. She washed, he dried. Ordinary, almost boring. But somehow intimate. At the door, ready to leave, he turned to thank her. Her hand brushed his wrist. "I know you don't want to let anyone in," she said. "I'm not asking. Just, if you ever decide to, I'm here." He didn't reply. Just looked at her. Then nodded. Barely. It wasn't a declaration. It was permission. Maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over. That night, Ryan didn't kiss her. And Madison didn't expect him to. She simply closed the door with a quiet click, and inside Ryan something stirred. Not love, not yet. But something close. Something alive. A flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. Weeks passed. They spent more time together, not as a couple, not exactly as friends, not just coworkers. Just two people walking side by side. Without labels. Without pressure. Without pretending. For the first time in a long time, Ryan let someone into his home. At first for an hour, then an evening. Madison never asked about old pictures. Never mentioned Emily. She didn't poke around. She accepted the space as it was, and made it warmer subtly without intrusion. One night she stayed over. There was no sex, no urgency, just presence. They lay in the dark and Ryan listened to her breathing. Felt her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. She didn't demand anything. She was just there. That night he dreamed of Emily. She stood across a foggy river watching him, then turned and walked into the mist. Ryan woke up with a strange feeling, not of longing, not of grief, but a farewell. A clean goodbye. The kind that didn't sting. But life rarely lets go that easily. A week later he ran into Nick. It happened outside the bank. A random Tuesday. Ryan was carrying a folder, walking fast. Nick appeared like a bad memory, same fast pace, same profile. They stopped. Just for a second. Their eyes met. Nothing was said. Ryan gave a slow, measured nod. Not a greeting. Not forgiveness. Just a period. And he walked on. That night Ryan told Madison everything. All of it. No editing. No softening. He didn't try to justify anything. Didn't try to be the victim. Just laid it all out, the marriage, the business, the betrayal, the punch. She didn't interrupt. Didn't flinch. When he finished, she simply said, "You weren't wrong. You just loved. I was blind. We all are when we love. That's not weakness. That's courage." Her hand found his. He looked down. For the first time he said aloud, "I'm tired of being alone." And that was a step. Not into some dramatic new chapter, but into something quiet and real. A willingness to try again. To build something not as a replacement, not to fix the past, but to grow something new. From pain. From emptiness. From honesty. Madison never tried to save him. He wasn't her project. She didn't want to fix anything. They were simply two people who knew how to be next to each other. And in that there was strength. Winter returned, softer this time. Blankets of snow. Slow skies. The streets quieted under a veil of gray mist, store windows glowing with soft yellow light. The air smelled like pine and damp wool. It was the kind of winter that asked for silence. Not the kind that hurt, the kind that heals. Ryan's mornings were different now. No more heavy breath staring at the ceiling. No more dreading the day. He didn't smile like a man in love. But he no longer turned away from the light through the window. His days had shape again, clear and steady. Madison became part of that rhythm. No fanfare. No status updates. No definitions. Sometimes she stayed over. Sometimes she didn't. It didn't matter. They weren't tied by promises but by presence. And that was enough. He rarely spoke about feelings. Even to himself. There were still walls inside him, thick, high concrete. But slowly windows began to open in those walls. Small at first. Then larger. Through them, light filtered in. And through that light he saw Madison differently. Not just as someone nearby, but someone who knew how to wait. How to be silent the right way. How to stay. In January, they went away for a weekend. Just the two of them. A small rental cabin outside Duluth. Pine trees, heavy snow, a fireplace that crackled like it belonged in a movie. No cell signal. No emails. No rush. Just quiet. The first day, they barely moved. Slept late. Ate curled up on the floor in blankets. Played old records they found in the cabin. It felt like the world had slowed just for them. The second day, as they sat by the fire, Ryan opened up. "I fell for her hard," he said. "Emily. I was scared to tell her at first. Used to write her poems, dumb ones. Hunted all over town for green carnations just because she once mentioned them. Everything I did was about her." Madison listened. Not asking questions. Just gently tracing his wrist with her fingers. "You're not different now," she said. "You just stopped listening to yourself. But I think you're starting again." He looked at her. "I'm afraid to trust again." "Then don't trust. Just be. If someone doesn't betray you, they'll stay with or without vows." He didn't know what to say. So he leaned in and kissed her. Not urgently. Not passionately. But slowly, like every unspoken word found a home in that moment. In that softness, there was understanding. Warmth. Trust. Not whole yet, but real. They stayed 3 days. When they returned, everything felt slightly different. The city. The office. Even Ryan. He found himself wanting to care again, not for success, but for meaning. He called a team meeting. Not as a manager. As a leader. People noticed. Things shifted. He introduced new ideas, encouraged feedback. Listened. For the first time in years, his company felt alive. Madison started working on a new internal project, her own idea. An automated inventory system the company had needed for years. She stayed late, got frustrated, debated with herself. He never hovered, never interfered. They didn't separate his business from her contribution. It was all shared, not by law but in spirit. Ryan began reconnecting with the few friends he hadn't completely lost. One by one. First coffee, then dinners. Awkward at first, full of pauses. But eventually laughter came back. Old stories. Memories that no longer hurt. Just reminders he was still human. But one meeting still hadn't happened. He hadn't seen Emily in over a year. Hadn't heard from her. Didn't know where she was or who she was with. And didn't care to find out. Until one day he found a letter in his mailbox. A real letter. No return address. Just her handwriting. I'm sorry to intrude. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I remember. Not your mistakes. Mine. The only one that mattered. You were the light. I chose the shadow. I hope you found light again. Forgive me. E. He read it standing on the balcony, the winter wind biting his face. He felt no rage. No sorrow. Just a quiet ache. And forgiveness not asked for because it had already happened. He folded the letter. Didn't throw it out. Just placed it in a drawer with a few old papers. Not to keep it, but to accept it. Because memory, he'd learned, wasn't the enemy. It was just another part of the path. That night he came home. Madison was warming soup, humming a tune, barefoot in his shirt. He stepped behind her, wrapped his arms around her. I got a letter, he said. From her. She didn't turn. You okay? I let it go. Finally. She turned. Smiled. Then you're free. They ate dinner, their first as a real family. No ceremony. No declarations. Just trust. And silence that no longer carried pain. Only peace. And it was the beginning of something new. Something real. Something deeply human. Spring came suddenly, no slow thaw, no gentle lead-up. One day, frost clung to sidewalks and tires cracked across ice. The next, asphalt shimmered with puddles, raindrops drummed against windows, and the air smelled like wet soil and new beginnings. Ryan stood in the kitchen, watching the shift through the window while Madison packed her workbag. She moved barefoot across the apartment, scolding him out of habit for forgetting the kettle on again. Nothing extraordinary was happening. And yet, in that nothing, everything was there, quiet, routine, real life. He didn't tell her he hadn't been sleeping well. Not because of pain. Just a strange chill that settled in his chest some nights, as if some part of him couldn't catch up with the present. Like he was living in two dimensions at once, one where a woman he cared for made coffee in his kitchen and another where echoes of betrayal still whispered at the edge of his mind. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to seem weak. But that silence too carried a weight. Work was busy that day, a blur of documents, calls, scheduling conflicts, supply chain revisions. By 6 p.m. the office had emptied. Ryan stayed behind. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. For once it wasn't Emily's face that haunted him. It was his own. The man he used to be before betrayal. Wide-eyed. Hopeful. All in. That man was gone. Or buried. He walked to the hallway mirror and looked at himself. 35. Sharp features. Strong jaw. Still upright. But in his eyes a trace of something old. Not fear. Not bitterness. Just a hesitation to believe in anyone. Including himself. He reached for his phone and typed a message to Madison. You don't have to carry my shadows. I'll understand if it's too much. I know I'm not fully here all the time. Her reply came almost immediately. I know you're here. Even when you're quiet. Your shadows are part of you. I'm not trying to run from them. I want to be there when they leave. He stared at the screen for a long time. And then for the first time in years he cried. Not loud. Not with sobs. Just tears. Simple. Quiet. As if his heart had decided to loosen its grip without asking permission. That became the turning point. He began to speak. Not always. Not everything. But sometimes in the evenings when they lay side by side. Or in the kitchen while the kettle boiled. Or on walks back from the store. He talked about fear. Guilt. How long he'd been unable to forgive not just Emily or Nick, but himself. For not seeing it. For trusting blindly. For hitting Nick. For losing his own sense of self. Madison never tried to make it better. She didn't offer cures or fixes. She just listened. And that in the end was the thing that saved him. One afternoon in late spring when the trees had started blooming and children's voices echoed through the parks again, Ryan realized something. He could walk past that restaurant now. The one where it all fell apart. And not stop. Not glance in. Not tremble. In May, Madison suggested a trip. To Tbilisi, she said. Georgia. Wine, hills, crazy drivers, old stone streets. I think you'd like it. He hesitated, but only briefly, and then agreed. The city was alive, ancient and chaotic and warm in ways Minneapolis never could be. The air smelled of fresh bread and tobacco. Every street had music. They walked, talked, ate too much. On their third evening, they sat on a tiny balcony with coffee and cheap pastries. The city glittered below them. I want you in my life, Ryan said. For real. All the way. She didn't respond right away. Just reached across the table and took his hand. That was louder than any words. When they came home, everything felt clearer. Sharper. Brighter. Kyle, Madison's brother, met Ryan in the office parking lot one morning. They hadn't talked in weeks. You look different, Kyle said. Worse. Alive. Those two words hit harder than any compliment. Because for the first time in years, Ryan actually felt that way. Alive. Not functioning. Living. And then one day it happened again. He saw Nick. He was sitting alone in the park, reading a paperback, looking older, more weathered. Ryan almost didn't recognize him. But when he did, he didn't turn away. He walked over and sat down on the bench next to him. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ryan spoke. I'm not here for revenge. And I'm not trying to forget it. But I realized something. If I hadn't gone through it all, I wouldn't be who I am now. Nick looked up. His face was pale, hollow. He nodded. I've got nothing to say. Nothing I say would change anything. Then don't say anything. Just live differently. Ryan stood. Walked away. And with each step, another knot inside him unraveled. The sun was warm. Children screamed joyfully in the distance. Flowers bloomed along the sidewalk. And for the first time, Ryan understood something. The past wasn't his enemy. It was the foundation. And yes, it was possible to live again. Not survive. Not hide. But live. Summer arrived without asking. Not the calendar kind marked by ads and fireworks, the real one. Thick heat in the mornings. That hazy, suffocating city air. Long evenings that begged for windows to stay open, for shoulders to be bare, for words to be few. The city simmered, but Ryan felt calm inside, not overheated, not frozen. Just steady. As if his heart had finally stopped skipping beats. Madison kept working with him. They never made their relationship official in any formal sense, no announcements, no labels, no status changes. Yet everyone around them knew. Not because anyone overheard or pried, but because something had changed in the way they moved through the office. Their glances. Their timing. The way they occupied space near each other. It wasn't performative. It was depth, the kind you can't fake. No one asked questions. And that silence, it wasn't avoidance. It was respect. Sometimes Ryan woke up before Madison. He wouldn't get up immediately. He'd just watch her breathe. Watch how she curled her fingers slightly when she slept. How she murmured things under her breath, dreams caught halfway. He didn't know when this quiet had become his peace. He used to live loudly. Big energy. Big gestures. Now joy lived in these small moments, silence, breath, morning light. And in knowing that he no longer feared the day. But the past always finds its way to knock again. One evening they were sitting in Madison's apartment, small, warm, lived in, with herbs on the windowsill and books in precarious stacks when the doorbell rang. Madison opened it. It was Lila, one of her closest friends. Ryan had only met her once, maybe twice. But tonight, her face was off, strained, pale. Hey! I won't stay long, she mumbled. It's just... I heard something. About your ex. Ryan turned his head. Emily? Lila nodded. Someone said she's been in the hospital. Mental health. Breakdown, maybe? Depression. Or worse. No one's seen her working in a while. She's been living alone. A friend saw her, said she looked thin. Vacant. I wasn't going to say anything. But I thought you might want to know. Silence filled the room. Ryan didn't speak. Inside, there was no anger. No satisfaction. Not even sorrow. Just a question. Small. Sharp. Piercing. Madison sat beside him. She didn't say anything either. Just placed her hand gently on his shoulder. The next day, Ryan drove to the hospital. Not because he wanted to see her. Not because he hoped for answers or closure. Just because you can't truly shut a door until you've looked through it one last time. It was a small psychiatric facility on the outskirts of the city. Bland brick, peeling signs, the smell of antiseptic and linoleum. Her room was third on the left. She sat on the windowsill, knees tucked to her chest, hair cropped short, a book in her lap that she wasn't reading. Her face was pale. Her eyes distant. She didn't notice him at first. Then she looked up and flinched. A slow, crooked smile spread across her lips. Ryan. Hey. I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I. More silence. I broke, Ryan. Back then. And I kept breaking. He left. Everything left. You were right. Everything we had, it was you. I just ruined it. I didn't come for that. Then why? To say that I'm still here. And I'm not angry. Her eyes filled. She whispered. Do you still love me? He shook his head. No. She gave a small laugh. Then you're lucky. No. We both are. In different ways. He walked out of that room lighter. It was like placing the last period on the longest sentence of his life. He was no longer the man who'd been betrayed. He was the man who had survived. That night, he held Madison tighter than usual. She didn't ask what happened. But he told her anyway. Thank you, he whispered, for being here. She kissed his shoulder. I always will be. A few weeks later, he sold the apartment he used to share with Emily. Not out of pain. Just because it no longer meant anything. He didn't feel tethered to it anymore. It wasn't home. It was just a shell. He moved in with Madison. Into her scent, her rhythm, her quiet laughter. And one ordinary afternoon, nothing special in the air, he asked her. Want to go to the ocean? Just because? She looked up from her book. Are we running from something or towards something? He smiled. Toward ourselves. They left in early September. Off-season. The tourists were gone. Beaches were empty. The breeze was cooler. The sea was calmer. Everything felt untouched. It wasn't the beach he'd once gone to with Emily. It wasn't tied to any memory. It was new. That was the point. Madison drove. Ryan stared out the window, watching fields blur past, quiet towns, old bus stops. It all looked like another lifetime. He didn't say much. But inside he knew this wasn't just a vacation. It was a crossing. A quiet step into something he'd been afraid to admit. The house they rented sat right on the shore. Wood walls. Eastern windows. In the mornings, light poured in like gold. Waking up was easy there. Talking was easy. Breathing was easy. On the third night, sitting on the sand wrapped in a shared blanket, Ryan said, I used to think betrayal would change me forever. That it would erase something in me. She looked over, not speaking. But I was wrong. It didn't erase anything. It just made me hide. From myself. From my openness. From how deeply I could care. I was scared to ever expose that again. To ever let someone in. She touched his hand. And now I know being betrayed doesn't mean you're weak. It just means someone else couldn't handle your depth. And that's on them. She didn't say anything. Just held his hand tighter. In that moment, Ryan realized something. He hadn't just found someone he could love again. He'd found someone who could meet him at his depth. Without flinching. They listened to the waves. The sky was dark. The sea hummed like a lullaby. And for the first time in years, Ryan felt whole. One evening during their trip, they wandered into a tiny seaside cafe. It had creaky chairs, scratched tables, and a fat orange cat sleeping on the windowsill. A storm had just passed, and the air still smelled of salt and electricity. At the next table sat an elderly couple. They didn't speak much, just held hands across the table, fingers linked. Occasionally, the man leaned in to whisper something, and the woman laughed quietly like a child. Ryan couldn't look away. Do you think forever exists? He asked Madison. She set her mug down. I believe in what's real. Forever is just time. But truth? That lasts? He nodded slowly. That old couple, their quiet connection, it wasn't about time. It was about staying when the world changed. About choosing each other again and again. After the ocean, something shifted inside him. Even physically. His posture softened. His voice became calmer. He laughed more. His movements slowed, no longer sharp and defensive. A new layer had grown, not the bright energy of youth, but something deeper, acceptance. Presence. When they returned to the city, Ryan approached his business differently. He delegated more. Trusted younger team members. Gave up micromanaging. Allowed mistakes. The surprising part? It worked. Things didn't fall apart. They thrived. Because, for the first time, Ryan wasn't trying to control everything out of fear. He was leading, not guarding. Madison, meanwhile, took on a new project, her idea. A streamlined data infrastructure system the company desperately needed. She threw herself into it. Sometimes she was frustrated. Sometimes she argued with herself out loud. But Ryan never stepped in. He let her lead. They didn't divide things into mine and yours. Everything they built together. Without saying it. It just was. Ryan started meeting with friends again. Not all of them. But a few good ones. One-on-one at first. Then small group dinners. The first few were clumsy, full of cautious pauses. But gradually the ease returned. Old stories stopped stinging. They made people laugh again. That too was healing. But there was still one encounter left unspoken. Ryan hadn't seen or heard from Emily in over a year. He didn't know where she was or what had become of her. He didn't look. Didn't want to. But then one quiet morning a letter arrived. Not an email. A real letter. No return address. Just his name on the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I remember. Not your mistakes. My own. The one that ended everything. You were the light. I chose the shadow. I hope you found light again. Forgive me. E. Ryan read it standing in the hallway, shoes still on. He didn't feel pain. Or anger. Just quiet. A soft ache. And a forgiveness that had already happened long ago without words. He didn't throw the letter away. He folded it carefully and tucked it in the drawer where he kept old things, not because he needed it, but because memory isn't the enemy. It's just one of the things we carry. That night, he came home to Madison. She was in the kitchen, barefoot in his t-shirt, stirring soup and humming. He walked in and wrapped his arms around her from behind. I got a letter today, he said. From her. She didn't stop stirring. You okay? I think so. I think I finally let it go. She turned to him and smiled. Then you're finally free. They ate together. No ceremony. No grand toasts. Just two people sharing a meal with nothing unsaid between them. And for the first time it felt like family, not by name but by truth. Not long after, spring slipped quietly into the city. The streets warmed. Rain came more often than snow. The air smelled like pavement and green things. One Saturday morning, as sunlight filled the kitchen, Ryan watched Madison pack her work bag. She fussed about missing socks, sipped coffee from a chipped mug, and smiled at nothing in particular. And Ryan felt something settle in his chest. Not a rush. Not adrenaline. Just peace. This was real. Not perfect. But real. Later that night, as they walked along the river, he stopped suddenly. I want us to be a family, he said. She looked over, surprised but not startled. We already are, she said. I mean, officially. If you want to. She smiled. No tears. No drama. I want to. But not because it changes us. Just because it says what already is. They got married quietly. Just the two of them. No guests. No dress code. No speeches. They signed the papers, then walked to a nearby cafe and shared a cherry pie. Ate with their hands. Laughed like kids. And in that moment, Ryan felt lighter than he ever had. The next day, back in the office, he opened his laptop and saw an email from an old contact. A proposal. A new joint venture. Big. Risky. Bold. He read it twice. Then once more. And realized he was ready. He called a meeting. Madison joined as the lead architect for the systems side. The team buzzed with energy. Ideas flew. People leaned in again. They were building something. Not just for profit, but for purpose. Every evening they came home together. Ate together. Sat in silence together. And Ryan knew he was home. Autumn crept in quietly, first with a thin morning fog, then with golden streaks in the trees, then with a chill that clung to fingers and breath. The city changed colors slowly, like someone repainting it while the world slept. The air smelled of fallen leaves, warm bread, wet asphalt. Ryan loved this time of year. Autumn reminded him of transitions, not endings, not beginnings, but the space in between. Where things don't break, but shift. Where people don't collapse, they shed. The new project he and Madison had launched over the summer had taken off. What started as a collaboration between a few trusted contacts had grown. 3 more partners joined. 2 major suppliers signed on. The pace became relentless, meetings, reports, travel, late nights. But Ryan didn't burn out this time. Because he wasn't running on panic or fear. He had something he'd never truly had before, foundation. Madison handled the growing pressure with her usual grace, cool, focused, unshakable. She didn't hover over Ryan. She didn't need to. They were steady in their roles and even steadier together. She didn't ask for updates, but she always seemed to know when he needed a break. Sometimes she would light a candle and put on a record and just sit waiting. And when Ryan came home, tired and silent, all it took was a look and the noise in his head faded. One late autumn night, everything went wrong at once. One of their newest partners, a man named Bennett, broke a handshake deal. Rerouted inventory. Made calls he shouldn't have. Undermined trust they had worked hard to build. The loss wasn't massive in dollars, but it was personal. A betrayal. Sharp and familiar. The kind that triggered something deep in Ryan's bones. He came home late. Didn't speak. Sat in the kitchen without turning the lights on. Just stared into the dark. Madison came out of the bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, holding a mug of mint tea. Do you want to talk? No. Then I'll just sit with you. She pulled out a chair. Saturday. Quiet. Steady. After a long silence, Ryan spoke. You know what scared me the most today? That when it happened, when I realized he'd stabbed us in the back, I didn't feel shocked. I felt familiar. Like betrayal is something I should expect. Like it's built into the world. Madison didn't flinch. But it's not, she said. You didn't go back there. You stayed here. That means you've changed. He looked at her, eyes heavy but alert. There was no pity in her gaze. Only quiet understanding. A knowing. The next morning, Ryan called a meeting with the other partners. He didn't explode. Didn't accuse. He laid out facts. Drew clear lines. Removed Bennett from operations. Rebuilt the system they'd led him into. Efficient. Professional. Strong. And people noticed. This wasn't the old Ryan, the one who lashed out and imploded. This was a man who had walked through hell and come out with calm fire in his voice. He didn't punish. He protected. Not with vengeance, but with boundaries. And in that, Ryan felt the true difference. He was no longer afraid of losing. He had already lost once. Everything. And survived. Now, even his fear had evolved. Later that week, something shifted again. It happened while they were walking back from the store. Madison slowed as they passed a boutique window. Inside was a tiny puffer jacket. Bright yellow, with tiny bear ears on the hood. She pointed and smiled. Would you want one like that? For a little guy, she teased. Ryan looked at the jacket. Then at her. Only if he had your eyes? She laughed. But her laugh was softer this time. Quieter. And Ryan felt something shift inside him, not panic, not doubt. Something like clarity. Or readiness. That night, as they walked through the empty streets, he said, I never thought I'd want a family again. Not after everything. She looked up. The wind played with her hair. But you do now? He nodded. I do. But not out of fear. Not to fill a hole. I want to give something, not fix something. Madison didn't cry. She just smiled, the kind of smile that felt like trust. Like home. They didn't make any announcements. They didn't buy books or plan rooms. They just let the thought live between them, like a promise written in invisible ink. And when it finally happened, when Madison came to him early one morning, holding the test in her shaking hands, they didn't speak for a long moment. He pulled her in, arms tight around her, forehead pressed to hers. And then he whispered, There's a whole life inside you. Do you feel that? We made life. She closed her eyes. And it will have no ghosts, she said. Only light. They decided not to tell anyone until the second trimester. It wasn't about secrecy. It was about sacredness. This was theirs. A quiet miracle. A secret not of fear, but of intimacy. Madison grew softer in her movements. Slower in her speech. She was still strong, still sharp. But there was a glow to her now, something Ryan noticed in quiet moments, how she stood at the window with tea, how she touched her belly and thought. Ryan started falling asleep with his hand over her stomach. As if protecting what he couldn't see. He had never known a peace like this. His past wasn't erased. But it no longer ruled him. It had become what it was always meant to be, part of his foundation. And everything he was building now had no cracks. Because what he had lost, he had mourned. What had hurt him, he had forgiven. And what he had feared, he had faced. Now he was moving forward. No longer looking back. Winter arrived late that year, as if it, too, had paused to catch its breath. Snow didn't fall until after New Year's, and when it finally came, it blanketed the streets like a forgotten promise. The city slowed down, wrapped in quiet. The air smelled of pine and old wool coats. Madison wore her scarves higher, her cheeks rounder now, her walk a little more careful. The shape of their child, their future, grew inside her, and in her eyes was a glow Ryan had never seen on another human being. A kind of softness he didn't know existed. He watched her constantly, not to protect, but to absorb. Everything about her felt rooted now. And every time he looked at her, he remembered what she had said, this child will have no ghosts. Only light. He believed her. He no longer feared the future. He didn't pretend it would be easy, didn't romanticize what was ahead. But he felt ready. Not for perfection, but for reality. For life. As it is. The business thrived. The new venture grew legs and kept running. Some days were difficult, but Ryan no longer viewed problems as signs of collapse. They were part of the journey. He no longer confused stress with danger. He knew when to stop. Knew when to delegate. Knew when to rest, something he had never allowed himself before. Sometimes he took entire days off. For no reason. He and Madison would stay in bed late, eat toast with jam, watch documentaries, or listen to jazz. The world outside could move as fast as it wanted. Inside their little orbit, time bent around peace. Then in March, on a cold, clear morning, their daughter was born. They named her Eva. Not because it was trendy or poetic, but because it was short, strong, pure. Ryan held her in his arms at 3:14 a.m. The nurse handed her to him while yawning, barely awake, but to Ryan the world had cracked open. She was tiny and impossibly heavy like everything real. He looked at her face, wrinkled and warm, and whispered, "You're everything." He didn't even realize he was crying until a tear slid onto her blanket. Madison slept nearby, exhausted but glowing. Her breathing steady, her hand limp on the bed rail. She looked like someone who had given everything and gained something immeasurable in return. Ryan sat beside her and held Eva. Not moving, just breathing. And for the first time, he understood why everything had to happen the way it did. The betrayal, the loss, the rage, the loneliness, the silence, the starting over. It had all led here, to this room, to this tiny bundle of new life, to this woman who had seen all his broken parts and stayed anyway. He didn't hate Emily. He didn't curse Nick. He didn't wish any of it undone. Because this moment, this life, could only have been born through the fire. 1 month later, while carrying Eva through a park in a soft sling, Ryan spotted Nick again. It was another accidental crossing, a sidewalk, an intersection, a glance that caught and held. Nick was alone, older, thinner. A backpack slung over one shoulder, his hands in his coat pockets. Their eyes met. Nick gave a subtle nod. Nothing more. Ryan returned the nod and walked on. There was no tension in his chest. No tightness. No trembling. Just stillness. The kind that only comes when something has fully closed. "You're not part of my life anymore," Ryan thought, "but you are part of my path." Later that spring, the three of them, Ryan, Madison, and Eva, drove out to the countryside. Just a weekend. Just a break from the city. They stayed in a small house that smelled of firewood and baked potatoes, with creaky floors and overgrown wildflowers outside. Madison held Eva close while they walked a gravel road that ran alongside a field of cherry blossoms. Ryan carried the stroller with one hand and her bag in the other. Everything smelled like wet bark and ash and early grass. Ryan watched the two girls, one in arms, one beside him, and realized he wasn't scanning the horizon for threats anymore. Wasn't listening for the familiar tremor of betrayal. He was simply here. Walking. Breathing. Alive. That night, after they put Eva down and the house had gone quiet, he and Madison sat on the porch wrapped in old blankets, sipping mint tea. The silence was warm, like thick wool. She turned to him, voice soft. "I think about what it must have felt like when I first met you," she said. "You were holding so much pain. I could feel it before you said a word." Ryan didn't flinch. He looked out at the sky, stars barely visible. "I remember that too. But now it feels far away. If you hadn't walked into that cafe that day, if you hadn't seen them, I'd still be blind," he finished. He turned to her. "But if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have found you. I wouldn't be holding this life now. That pain gave me a door. And I walked through it. I'm grateful for that." She took his hand. "So you're happy?" He smiled. "I'm more than happy. I'm whole." Madison laid her head on his shoulder. Her breath steady. Her warmth real. And in that moment he understood something else. Sometimes you have to lose everyone to find yourself. Sometimes the road to love wins through betrayal, solitude, and fear. But if you don't give up, if you keep walking, one day you find yourself sitting in the quiet, no longer haunted, and whispering to no one in particular. Now I know what it means to be alive. No big ending. No dramatic close. Just a light in the window. And a life that keeps going. Always. Summer returned in full, not tentative this time, but bold, humming with heat and buzzing with life. The sidewalks baked. Storefronts blasted cool air. The sound of sprinklers, laughter, wind chimes. And inside their apartment, the light came early and stayed late. Eva had begun sleeping through the night. Sometimes. And on those rare nights when the air was still and the city's noise receded like the tide, Ryan and Madison would sit on the couch, their daughter asleep in the next room, and simply breathe. Not every day was easy. Parenthood wasn't soft. It came with chaos, spilled milk, sleepless hours, endless questions, and a constant hum of responsibility. But Ryan never felt buried by it. Not like before. Because now he had a partner not just in name but in soul. Someone who didn't fill his silence with noise, but with presence. Someone who never asked him to be someone else, but who quietly waited while he returned to himself. One morning, Ryan stood by the window, holding Eva against his chest, her tiny hand clutching the fabric of his shirt. Outside, the street was waking up, joggers, buses, school kids chasing each other with backpacks bouncing. Madison was in the kitchen, humming an old tune as she brewed coffee. Ryan didn't say it aloud, but inside him a simple truth crystallized. This is it. Not a destination. Not perfection, but his life. Real. Complete. The business grew, but Ryan no longer measured success by numbers. He began mentoring younger entrepreneurs. Not lecturing, listening. Guiding. Offering the kind of presence he wished someone had offered him when everything first fell apart. And they respected him not for his titles, but for his honesty. For the calm steadiness of a man who had been broken and rebuilt himself without bitterness. Madison continued working on the tech side, now with a small team of her own. She'd become something of a quiet legend, not loud, not flashy, but efficient, patient, brilliant. She and Ryan didn't discuss roles. They just moved around each other with a rhythm that felt effortless now. When one faltered, the other stepped forward. No scorekeeping. Just balance. One weekend in August, they drove to the lake. Just the three of them. Eva squealed every time the breeze blew her hair. Madison packed sandwiches. Ryan drove with the windows down, music low. They sat on the dock for hours, toes in the water, sun on their skin, nothing urgent pressing at their backs. At one point, as the sun dipped low and turned the lake to gold, Ryan reached into the cooler, pulled out a bottle of sparkling juice, and raised it toward Madison. To everything that nearly broke us, he said. Madison raised her bottle, eyes steady. And everything that made us stronger. They clinked bottles. Eva clapped her hands as if she understood. Later that evening, as they lay on a blanket under the stars, Eva asleep between them, Ryan turned to Madison. I still have those days, he said quietly. Where I remember. The crash. The betrayal. The man I used to be. And sometimes I still feel like I'm walking through those shadows. She didn't flinch. I know, she said. And I'm still here. Even in the dark. He nodded. The stars blinked overhead. The air was soft. The night was full of crickets and peace. I used to think love was a promise, he said. But now I think it's a decision. Over and over. Every day. And you still choose me? Every time. She reached for his hand. And they lay there, hands intertwined, the weight of the past now featherlight, the future unwritten but no longer feared. Fall came again. Eva learned to walk. Madison laughed more. Ryan learned how to cook 2 good pasta dishes. They hosted small dinners. Adopted a rescue dog. Took photos, but not too many. Sent holiday cards that just said us in lowercase letters. One night, long after Eva had gone to bed, Ryan received a message request on social media. A name he hadn't seen in years. Nick Benson. His heart didn't lurch. He didn't hesitate. He clicked. Hey, I heard about the company. And the baby. I'm not trying to intrude. Just wanted you to know I'm happy for you. You deserved more than what I gave. I hope you found peace. Ryan read it twice. Then closed his laptop. He didn't need to respond. Forgiveness had already happened. In his body. In his home. In his life. The next morning, he walked Eva to the park. She waddled beside him, clutching his pinky with her entire hand. The grass was damp. The air smelled like earth and morning. She spotted a butterfly and squealed. Ryan watched her chase it, giggling, falling onto her hands and knees, then looking up, smiling, wild with joy. He bent down beside her and whispered, "You have no idea how much was lost to find you." She touched his cheek. And in that moment, Ryan knew he hadn't just healed. He hadn't just survived. He had been reborn. Everything before had been the fire. This was the garden. He stood, took her hand, and walked on. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. No more questions about what could have been. Just this. The moment. The day. The life. Whole. True. Quietly extraordinary. And it was enough. If you enjoyed the story, give it a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.